Okay, so one of the first things that comes up when people talk about deconstruction is, well, what is deconstruction? I hear this question all the time. And so this is actually quite an interesting question. When you ask what is a Christian, what is a Muslim, what is an atheist, generally speaking, what you're asking is, what does that person believe? What is their belief? What is their system of values and understanding of the world? And how can I identify that person based on their beliefs? Now, that's not exactly how one identifies someone that is deconstructing. Unfortunately, it's a lot more complex than this. I first came into this when I started to do my research on deconstructing Christians, and I sat down with a researcher, a friend of mine, and I said, this is what I want to do. And he said, well, who are deconstructing Christians? What is deconstruction? And I sat there and I thought, gosh, I've been working with these people for about 8 years. And I don't know how to answer that question very well. I kind of rambled for a long while to try and answer the question. And the reason is deconstructing Christians do not believe one set of things. They're not like a Christian who could say, I believe in a God who sent his son to die, that anyone that believes in him would be live forever in heaven, or whatever nuance of Christianity you might have. They're not like an atheist who says, well, I reject the notion of a theistic model, a model where there is a God. Deconstructed Christians could be both of those people. You could be a deconstructed Christian and you could be an atheist. You could be agnostic. You could be Christian still. You might be a progressive Christian. You might even still be, in some levels, quite a mainline Christian. And so it's very hard for us to nail down what is a deconstructing Christian. Because on the whole, someone that is deconstructing is not moving towards a specific belief. As they move, they fan out into this very broad spectrum of beliefs. You know, I've worked with thousands and thousands of people that have deconstructed, and many of them remain Christian. Many of them become atheists. Many of them are agnostic. Many of them go into Eastern religions like Taoism and Buddhism and find those alluring and interesting. Many claim to be spiritual but not religious and still hold on to some spirituality, some belief in the divine, a ground of being, God, but are not comfortable with the Christian language that they grew up with. There is such a complex, broad overview of what a deconstructing Christian is. And so it's very hard to define. What we found in doing our research is actually how you define a Christian, how you define a deconstructing Christian is not where they go or what they believe. It's based on what they are moving away from. And so, like I said, these deconstructing Christians, they move forward and fan out across this spectrum. But what's interesting is they move from a specific origin. And so there's 3 factors we found to fall into place as to what a deconstructing Christian is. Now, before I go into that, I just want to quickly touch on something. One of the things that people will often talk about is that deconstruction is like taking apart a house or deconstructing. They'll use kind of the dictionary definition of deconstruction, and that can be a very helpful analogy for a lot of people. It really is a very, very helpful analogy, but it's not fully fair. Lots of people will take apart their house and build an extension and mess around with their building, but they aren't necessarily deconstructing their faith. They aren't necessarily a deconstructing Christian. That's not to say that if someone is doing that and they don't qualify with the parameters of what a deconstructing Christian is, they're not welcome in the community. The deconstruction community is a very welcome place with no real parameters on who's welcome or not. Maybe some people are a bit more exclusive. They wouldn't like some conventional and fundamental Christians in there. But on the whole, it's very broad and open. So even if you don't tick these boxes, you're still very welcome to identify as a deconstructing Christian, to find a place in a home in the community of deconstruction. That is always the case for you. And so don't be put off if you don't tick these boxes. The other thing I'll say as well is deconstruction is a technical term that was coined in the 80s. It's a philosophical term. That the philosophical term of deconstruction as coined by Jacques Derrida is not what we're talking about when we talk about deconstructing Christians. Some Christians that deconstruct go into the philosophy of deconstruction and will look like that for sure. That happens, but actually not many. Deconstruction is actually, when we look at psychological stages, which we'll look at in some other videos, The stage of the philosophy of deconstruction is much later than what most people are going through as they deconstruct their faith. So what are the three things, right? Three things. The first thing is that we found that people that are deconstructing their faith, what they are doing is they question one's faith tradition and find it unable to satisfy those questions. And so it's not just so questioning, is Jesus going to come back and it'll be 7 years before a rapture, or will there be a rapture and then Jesus will come back 7 years after that? And, these are kind of more peripheral questions. When you deconstruct, the first marker of deconstructing is that you start to question the core components of what your faith tradition believes. It's a real unraveling of questioning real core things. The easiest way to notice, right, if you're doing this, is if you told your pastor, your friends, your church community, the questions you were asking, would they be very uncomfortable? And would they potentially go, well, that means you're not a Christian if you come to a different answer? Those are the core values, right? So a lot of people might say, well, I questioned this belief, and the pastor will go, yeah, that's fair enough. We've got a few people in the church that have a few different ideas about that. That's probably not a core value or a core belief of your faith tradition. But if you start, maybe you go, I'm actually not sure that God does miracles today. Maybe he doesn't heal people, and maybe that ended when the Bible came about. You might be uncomfortable in a charismatic church. You might be an odd person in a charismatic church, but most charismatic churches will go, okay, I guess you can believe that and be here. They're not going to throw you out. But if you went to your pastor and said, I don't believe that Jesus was the Son of God, or I don't believe Jesus died and rose again, you're going to have a problem in the vast majority of Christian churches, right? Because that's a core belief. And so we're talking about really core beliefs that are being questioned in that first stage. So if you tick that box, you go, okay, yeah, I tick the first marker of am I a deconstructing Christian? The second one is that there is a subsequent need, because the faith tradition failed to satisfy those questions in the first point. The second point is that there is a subsequent need to change some of your core beliefs about spirituality. Now, this could be as drastic as going, well, this whole thing is useless and nonsense and I'm an atheist now. That's a very extreme kind of change, but it might be much more subtle. It might be that you still go, gosh, yeah, I still believe in Jesus and I still believe in God. But I'm not really sure I believe in this model of the atonement. I don't know if I believe that God had to kill Jesus to forgive us. Is that really what happened at the cross? Do I really believe that a loving God has to murder to forgive someone? Or something like that, right? Or maybe it would be that you go, wow, I'm not really sure I believe in hell anymore in the conventional way. I don't think that God would burn people for eternity. Actually, I think maybe people cease to exist if they were terrible people. Or maybe I believe that God will restore everyone and do the healing work to heal them all. Those might be very problematic beliefs to have in a conventional church. It might be very core values challenged, but you have changed what you believe. It may make you feel quite uncomfortable in your conventional setting. But those two components have to be in place. You have to have questioned a core value and more often than not, a lot of core values of your faith tradition. And then you have to go about changing some of those core values. Now, what's interesting is, a lot of people will go into this in other videos, but I just want to touch on it. A lot of people focus on, well, if you deconstruct, you better reconstruct. There's a concept behind what deconstructing Christians are doing that it's a very destructive process. But the truth is, when you remove a belief, you replace it with something else. Even if I say, I don't believe in God anymore, that's a belief. I now believe that there is no God. And so deconstructing is practically an active process of reconstructing. As you deconstruct from one faith tradition, you are building a new framework of spirituality and meaning and your existential existence and your understanding of what there might be in the world as far as theological or philosophical outworkings. And so just bear that in mind, that these two components go hand in hand. As you remove beliefs, you naturally are replacing them with another belief. Even if that belief seems very negative to a conventional Christian, they might not like what you've done. And that really is what's going on when most people talk about Reconstruction. It's much more of a manipulative, I want you to come back to what I think is right, or I want you to arrive at the right answers as you deconstruct. So those are two main points. We question our core values, of the faith tradition, and then we change the core values of that faith tradition. Well, not of the faith tradition, but our core values get changed from what the faith tradition had. The third part is interesting, okay? And so what we found is that generally speaking, deconstructing Christians will, from that point on, have a reduced certainty or fundamental position in their areas of faith and spirituality. Now, there's a big asterisk on this point, okay? So for people to qualify on a more technical level as to what a deconstructing Christian is, they need to tick those three boxes. They need to question their core values of their faith tradition. They need to change the core values because the faith tradition couldn't answer it satisfactorily. And they then, long-term moving forward, have less certainty, absolutism, black and white fundamentalism about spirituality and about their concept of faith and spirituality. That comes with a big asterisk because that is more often than not developed over quite a period of time. People that are beginning their deconstruction process may be very absolute and fundamental still. You'll see this a lot as people start to deconstruct, that they actually become almost evangelists for deconstruction, right? They almost try and save their family from their fundamental beliefs into a new fundamental ideology. You see this in some forms of atheism. Atheists seem they need to save Christians from their delusion or something like that. A lot of atheists are nothing like that at all. But again, these earlier stages of deconstruction, a lot of people hold very fundamental and certain positions on their spirituality and faith. That's not to say that people have no certainty, no black and whites, no duality in their life as they deconstruct and move forward. But it's as they mature in their deconstruction, you will find, generally speaking, a reduced certainty and a reduced fundamental position. And so those three things are generally the markers of deconstruction. If you hear those three things and go, yes, 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 you are almost certainly a deconstructing Christian. It's certainly as far as a technical, academic definition goes. Now, like I said, there are problems with definitions. Some people might not tick that third box. They might tick the first two and then go, well, I'm still very certain and absolute and I'm quite fundamental. And I think that's a good thing. And that's okay. That's great. It may be that you're very early in this process and in time you may become less certain. That's possible. It may be that you stay quite certain, and you might not tick the box as on an academic weighting on are you a deconstructing Christian. That's not important. It's so not important. It's important to me in my research maybe, but it's not important. What's important is that you find a community that understands what you're going through. And I tell you what, going through just those first two parts is a very hard process. And many people that tick all three parts, or other people that only tick those first two parts, will understand what you're going through and will support you and come alongside you. And so that's a great thing. So don't feel that you're not part of this community. Don't feel that this alienates you and disqualifies you from being a deconstructing Christian. Only you have the right to call yourself a deconstructing Christian. If you want to be labeled that, if you want to fall into that bracket, go for it. That's great. All I'm trying to do is give a bit more of a hard, data-driven definition of what we are seeing as we study hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that fall into this category. And we look at who they are, what they believe, what their actions are, what their direction is in their movement of their understanding of spirituality and psychological growth. These are the markers that we're seeing that people fall into again and again and again. And so it's really helpful to know this. It also might be really helpful if you are quite certain still to go, maybe in my future there might be a little less certainty. I've been fighting that, but maybe that's okay. And that can be a really helpful thing, to hold on to things a little less tightly and not worry so much about having all the answers. Because let's be honest, having all the answers is very rarely something. I've not met anyone that's got all the answers yet. I certainly don't. And I've talked to many people and none of them have all the answers. I've talked to a lot of people that think they have all the answers. But we're all on a journey and we're all figuring it out. And we probably, if we were going to be a bit more honest, we all would be a little less certain on what we believe. And so that's it for now. I'm not going to belabor the point, but I just wanted to give you a rough overview of what is a deconstructing Christian, because it's a huge question that lots of people ask. There's, of course, lots of problematic components with this. People do not like to feel labeled. People do not like to be boxed in. Hopefully you can see that this is much less of a boxing in. It's defining where you've come from than where you're going. And I think it's really, really important as we define deconstruction that we do not define where people go, what their journey has to look like. That's really important. As much as possible, we need to let go of that. Because deconstruction does not end in a certain way. You'll hear this a lot when people, when someone famous deconstructs, maybe a John Steingard or a Joshua Harris or something, everyone suddenly wants to write a little newspaper article or, an op-ed piece, or people want to tweet about it. And everyone and their mom has a position on it, right? Well, very rarely moms, because women don't have a voice, right? But all these celebrity pastors and, the Gospel Coalition and John Piper and Bill Johnson or whoever are going to say their piece about, well, deconstruction is X, Y, or Z. And what's fascinating is, generally speaking, they have no idea what they're talking about. They don't know what a deconstructing Christian is. They don't know the definitions. They don't know the research that's been done. They don't know what the average deconstructing Christian looks like. They make sweeping statements. They'll say things like, well, everyone has doubts and they question things, but they always come back eventually. That's not true. Some people deconstruct and go back into some form of Christianity. Very rarely a very conventional and fundamental Christianity. Very rarely. Most deconstruct and go into maybe a progressive Christianity, those that stay in Christianity. But that's not the majority by any means. It's just a few people in the grand scope of things. It's certainly less than half the people stay within Christianity. Or at least decide to label themselves Christian moving forward. Many people go into a spiritual but not religious position. Many go into some Eastern faiths. Many hold no faith at all and claim to be atheists. And many hold an agnostic position where they are maybe interested in some spirituality sometimes, or maybe they lose interest and go, I'm just not that interested right now. There's probably something, but I'm not sure what. There's so many positions, and that is just scraping the top of the barrel. It's just the tip of the iceberg, those different positions. There are a myriad of thousands and thousands of various different positions of spirituality. And I'd include atheism as a spirituality because I just mean, when I say spirituality, I just mean the way we frame meaning in existence. Okay. So, you can frame meaning in existence as being, we're just some material that gains consciousness and are trying to make some meaning in existence. And so, don't get put off by that word of spirituality if I use it. All right, that's enough for me on this topic, but we're going to be doing a series of videos on this, and we're going to be looking at a whole host of different things. We're going to be looking at some of the problems of deconstruction. We're going to look at why people deconstruct. We're going to look at a lot of the problems that we face. Things like, how do I talk to family members? How do I know whether I should leave church or not? What resources are out there to help me? What about Reconstruction and things like that? Like, we'll look at all these kind of different topics because they're so important, really, really important. And I want as best as I can, I want to help you on your journey. I do not want to define what your journey looks like. I do not want to tell you where you need to go. I do not have any dog in this fight. I don't care where you end up. I really don't. I just want you to be happy and healthy, right? And so if that is as an atheist, if that is as a progressive Christian, if that is going back into fundamental conventional Christianity, wouldn't be my journey. None of those tick my box, but I want them to be, I want whatever ticks your box to be your path. And so in these videos, I'm going to do my very best to not really talk about my journey and my path. That's not relevant at all. And I think a lot of people, as they deconstruct, are looking for certainty early on, and that can be really manipulated. And so we'll look at that in a future video when we talk about Reconstruction. But be wary as you deconstruct of people that will give you black and white answers, of people that will say, this is how it's going to go for you. People that say, this is where you'll end up. People that say, this is the answer. It may be the answer that they have arrived at. But first of all, we're all still pulses beating, alive. We change our minds all the time. So anyone that gives you an absolute position, well, I'm sure they had an absolute position of something else in the past as well, and that changed. And so we all might change our minds. That's the first of all thing. Anytime we give an absolute, this is the way it is, we just are blind to a reality that we constantly are changing and growing and evolving. And so be very wary of that. We shouldn't be on the lookout for people that are giving us absolute answers. We should be hopefully allowing people to guide us as we seek out our own answers. Follow your curiosity, follow what interests you. Ask the questions you've got. This is the process. You ask questions of the faith tradition. You try and answer them. You fail to answer them, you change what you believe. If they fail to answer it, you change what you believe. You move forward and you become less radical about that's the answer or this is the answer. You let go of that need as you seek your answers. That's a model that gives you a lot of freedom, a lot of openness. You don't have to be boxed in by anyone's reconstructive journey or deconstructive journey. Some people are very fundamental about how you deconstruct or what questions you can ask. There is no limit to the questions you ask. There are no limit to where you seek those answers from. I really believe that, and I hope that you find that in your journey. I really hope that you do not allow others to box you in on this journey as you go. All right, that's enough for me. I could ramble about this forever, but we'll leave it to other videos. I hope you're doing well. I'm always here to help. Reach out anytime you want. I'm on Instagram. It's Phil Drysdale. I'm really happy to help in any way I can. If you are deconstructing, there is no reason to do this alone. It can be an incredibly lonely process, but the deconstructionnetwork.com is a free resource to help you find others deconstructing in your local area. If you would like to support what I do, everything I do is for free, from talking to people for hours on end to producing resources and podcasts. It is only possible because people give generously. There's never any need to give. It will always be free, everything I do. But if you do, we do have an amazing private community group that we talk on over on Discord that you would gain access to. And we do regular audio and video chats on there as well. So it'd be great to see you in there. But of course, never any requirement. And of course, please, please, please come and talk to me on Instagram. I love connecting with people. I love helping people on their journey. If you need a safe space to process your deconstruction, I would love to connect. It's just at Phil Drysdale. Love every one of you. Peace.